Welcome to Catalyzing Faith, where we seek to be a catalyst for your faith so that you can be a catalyst in the world around you. This series is called Catalyzing Questions, where we aim to respond to some common questions that you're bound to encounter. And today we are addressing the question, aren't we all really atheists? This is an objection I get all the time. It goes something like this. The Christian rejects 5,999 gods out there, and the atheist rejects 6,000 gods. So the atheist just goes one god further in this process, in which case the atheist and the Christian are basically the same thing. I guess that this sort of response is supposed to be some sort of clever psychological trick, right? It seems to treat atheism as this end point, this goal that we are aspiring to. But as far as any sort of legitimate argumentative value goes, this has nothing to offer. All right, let's think about this. This objection fails from the very start because it rests on a complete misunderstanding of how words work. Theism is a word. It has a definition. It means a belief that the proposition God exists is true. Atheism is also a word, which means it also has a definition. And while the specifics of what that definition is may be controversial in some cases, and I promise I will cover that in a different video, the minimum for atheism is a rejection of the proposition God exists. So while theism requires that you affirm that God exists, atheism requires that you reject that God exists. In other words, to get to atheism from theism requires a rejection of the very most central claim that makes theism what it is. So while believing in 2 or 3 gods and trying to get from that to believing in one God may not span that large of a conceptual gap, the gap between theism and atheism quite literally could not be larger, because to move to atheism requires the theist to abandon its very central position. This is just how words work, and the silliness of this objection can be demonstrated with any number of examples. I'll give you one. I am married. From this you know I have a wife. Now let's say my friend Eric were to come up to me and say, hey, I have a couple of tickets for a bachelor's only whiskey tasting event this weekend. Do you want to come? That'd be a pretty weird question because as a married man, you know I cannot be a bachelor. But let's say he forgot about this, so I remind him. If he were to respond with saying, what's the matter? We're all basically bachelors. I'm just unmarried to one fewer woman than you are. We'd find this to be a pretty ridiculous answer because we know the very definition of what it means to be a bachelor means not married to anyone. And by definition, that means I, as a married man, could not qualify as being a bachelor. But here's the thing. The atheist who says, we're all basically atheists, I just go one God further than you do, is making a logically equivalent argument. And by logically equivalent, I mean equivalently absurd. And while I'm pretty sure they think they're being clever, the reality is they're not. This is a ridiculous statement. It shouldn't be said by anyone, so whenever anyone comes up to you and says, we're all basically atheists because I just go one God further than you do, you can look at them and say, no, we're really not, and you should read a dictionary. Thanks for watching this installment of Catalyzing Questions. If you enjoyed this video, please stick around and check out some of our other content. And while you're at it, like this video and don't forget to hit subscribe.